Purple worms are the kings of desert random encounters, but there's one thing that you can do to make them even better, and there's a new king coming. So before we break down the purple worm's personality, lairs, battle tactics, and allies, including the one trick that will leave your players talking about the encounter for months afterwards, let's talk about the big worm on the horizon, the Dune Eater. My name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I've been DMing for 30 years and run 7 weekly games of Dungeons & Dragons. I also run a coaching program to help DMs to bypass the countless mistakes that I've made over the years and to save the thousands of hours that I've spent on the hobby. You can find the details in the description. The Dune Eater is part of Homie and the Dude's latest system-agnostic Kickstarter, Scorched Basin. In this Dune meets Mad Max crossover setting, these monstrosities travel the sands, mouths wide, devouring everything in their path. Their attunement to the mysterious magic known as the current allows them to see through the wastelands around them. And they blast superheated sand and stone that they've digested behind them to speed their progress and add to their glassy carapace. Or spew it in your face as a deadly attack to add to their voracious maw. If outrunning one of these on your Mad Max-style vehicle while swerving from side to side to avoid purple worms that are just the wormlings of this creature that pop up in your way, and concentrating to try and utilize the current in order to convince the beast to leave you alone sounds exciting to you, then check out the Kickstarter now. And meanwhile, let's talk about purple worms. They're easy to run as mindless terrors because they basically are. Ever ravenous, they roam aimlessly and endlessly, looking for anything smaller than themselves for them to devour. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for personality. And an intelligence of 1, wisdom of 8, and charisma of 4 don't exactly scream beauty pageant winner either. But it's what we have to work with from the Monster Manual for World Building. Based on that, I would say that purple worms don't usually have a hunting territory long term. Instead, they sort of randomly pop up depending upon their wanderings, sticking around in one piece of territory only long enough to devour everything that they can before moving on. This makes introducing them as a random encounter easy, but you can also assume that a purple worm sighting in one area would travel as news to warn everybody nearby, and would make a lot of people nervous, because it'd be pretty hard to predict where they're going to go next. They're also always hungry, which means that attacks will be frequent, not widely spaced apart. And they'll tend to attack a place with plentiful food over and over again, if possible. At least until they've been driven off, slain, or have eaten everything worth eating. And this is probably where your adventurers come in, called upon to hunt the beast down and kill it. And since its attacks are unpredictable, you pretty much hunt it either by laying out bait and hoping, or by delving into its lair. But a purple worm's lair is not a traditional one. Because when I say lair for a purple worm, I really mean the tunnels that it just happens to be in. They are not immune to exhaustion, so they do need to sleep. But as a burrowing creature, they'll tend to do so underground. Since they have the tunneler feature, their lair will therefore be made up of a twisting warren of 10-foot wide tunnels. These winding tunnels will be generally cramped and will twist and turn enough that there'll be poor sight lines. This requires a group to either clump up together to fight the beast, or if they're spread out, to risk being burrowed into from one side and swept off. One exception to the random nature of their lairs is when purple worms have laid eggs, which are supposedly quite valuable in D&D. Who doesn't want a pet death worm, I guess? Canonically, they reproduce asexually, poor souls. But after laying eggs, they stick around at least until the wormlings hatch. Sometimes they were even known to leave other creatures alive to protect their eggs, setting up a kind of symbiotic relationship by placing their eggs in the middle of a creature's territory. And this does give us the option to include some allies, so that the egg hunt you send your characters on can have some additional challenges. Another possibility for a purple worm's lair is that the tunnels you're expecting lead to something extra. because purple worms in their random wanderings will sometimes unearth places that are supposed to stay forgotten. The purple worm's tunnels are really just another entrance into a place that should have been left alone. But to the worm, it's probably just an unexpected pantry. Regardless, if you pick another layering creature, like for instance a dragon, then you can include a purple worm on the outskirts of its territory to provide a terrifying entrance into that lair. But don't expect your party to crawl through those tunnels without a fight, because purple worms will attack anything that they think is small enough to eat. And they've got big mouths. And one of the defining characteristics of purple worms is that although they don't have eyes, they have excellent senses, with 60-foot tremor sense letting them sense you through solid ground, and then 30-foot blind sight allowing them to see through any kind of concealment, stealth, or invisibility to bite you. They're fast with a 50-foot land or burrow speed, though it's halved if they're tunneling through solid stone. And they're dangerous both coming and going, because its multi-attack is a combo of a bite and a poisonous tail stinger attack. From a narrative standpoint, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to be able to sting something with your tail that you've already bit and have in your mouth, but props to them for flexibility, I guess. And on the other hand, if you bite at them and miss, then stinging at them with your tail as you dig your way past makes a certain amount of sense too. The biggest problem for me with this has always been the use of an enormous gargantuan 4x4 token for a purple worm. It makes them super clunky on a 5-foot square grid, and sort of negates the value of their huge movement speed and their ability to burrow in and out of the action. It literally means that in order to tunnel through from one side of a 10-foot wide tunnel that supposedly they left, they have to breach a 20-foot section of that tunnel and spend over 40 feet of movement just to get from one side to the other of it with their entire bulk. So, I found an alternative, and it makes them way better. Instead of using a gargantuan token, I use 3 or more large ones instead. It's a lot of fun and pretty simple. You just burrow for all your movement between locations, and whenever it pops up, you place the middle segment where the head used to be and move the tail up to where the middle section was. Then you set your bite range from the mouth token and your tail range from the tail token, and enjoy. It adds a little complication, but the look on your players' faces will be worth it. The bite attack, which comes with an automatic grapple and restrain, can be brutal enough all on its own. As a gargantuan creature, the worm isn't technically slowed down by having something in its mouth unless that something is huge size or larger, which doesn't make a lot of sense if it's tunneling by eating the earth in front of it. But if it's moving through existing tunnels or successfully swallows its opponent, it should be able to slither off quickly, striking at anyone who tries following it with its deadly tail. And since they're probably taking a beating from the other adventurers there, when they do manage to swallow an opponent, they're probably going to take off at full speed with it and just come back later for another meal after they've finished digesting. Worms aren't smart enough to target the best prey for this tactic. Fortunately? Probably fortunately. But they are likely to target the most edible options. People coated in armor and clanking away probably aren't it, which does help it somewhat to target creatures with a lower strength score, because that strength save is all that stands between a bitten opponent and going down the hatch with its bonus action swallow attack. If you thought things were dire when you're in the creature's mouth, once you're swallowed, they really get bad. You're still restrained, but now blinded instead of grappled, and with total cover between you and the rest of the world. Not to mention that you're taking acid damage every time the worm gets another turn. Without sight, there's not a lot of ways out. Lower level or subclass based teleportation usually requires sight, and the ones that don't often fail if you have to guess where you're targeting and might end up in a solid object since, you're inside a burrowing creature in the earth. Swallowed prey can force the worm to make a saving throw by dealing enough damage from inside it in one turn, but the worm has an almost 50-50 chance of succeeding on that saving throw, and if they do, then the prey ends up with no action left, prone at the creature's feet, waiting to be swallowed again. And purple worms, like many dogs, don't mind re-eating something they just threw up.
Brother,
It's gross, but effective. As mentioned, these worms don't have much by way of allies, except when protecting their nests. When it comes to nest protectors, it helps if there's a reason why the worm wouldn't have just devoured the creature in question. Typically, that means either prey is too big to eat, or it isn't that much of a meal. Some classics in print include Fomorian giants, who are definitely too big, and giant spiders, who must taste bad, I guess. But they both synergize quite nicely. Fomorian giants are one of a very rare group of monsters that can inflict exhaustion, which makes prey easier to swallow thanks to lessened saving throws, and not as effective at getting back out again thanks to reductions to attack rolls. Meanwhile, the webs of giant spiders just make it easier for a purple worm to get a successful bite thanks to the restrain condition. And after all, biting is the first and most important step of purple worm digestion. Speaking of, while you're digesting this video, don't forget to check out the Scorched Basin Kickstarter. And if you're still in the desert mood, then check out my guides for brass or blue dragons. After you watch the cat video, of course. See you soon.